In such a regulated space, and a very competitive one at that, why does PR matter so much for fintechs? And also, how does it help them to win the trust of investors, partners, and regulators while aligning with obviously national priorities?
This is a great question, and it's something that a lot of the people that we work with ask us when we start the conversation around PR. In our region specifically, we've seen that traditionally PR was not something of top priority in the minds of founders, right? You have many other things to think about before you think about the publicity. You have the technology, the manpower, the investors, all that stuff. I'll make here a parallel with Silicon Valley because that's where we've seen a lot of success. In contrast with us, Silicon Valley has always had this first publicity focus while they're building their solution or their technology. And it showed some interesting findings. One, the more visible and in public you build, the more trust you gain from whoever your target audience is, be it you have a B2C consumer base or you have a B2B more corporate base. Two, we're seeing that investors traditionally started investing more in founders as opposed to brands. And we've seen that after 2008. I feel like the accountability of the person that is behind the brand, it is a lot more valuable in terms of brand equity than an actual logo. And these two things have been the drivers for it. Now, when you zoom into the market that we're in, specifically the Middle East, we are a very segmented market and very diverse market, right? Just within the UAE, we have 4 or 5 regulators, countless numbers of free zones. Also, it has become a place where foreign players are coming in to test out all sorts of use cases for the technologies. Now, AI, for example, has become a massive headline and a massive focus for us as a region. In the other side, you have Saudi Arabia, which is coming out of the oil economy, going into a more diversified economy, and is making incredible strides towards progress, opening up all sorts of sandboxes through the regulator. So in our region, we see more and more that a startup that leads their efforts of fundraising or regulatory approach just by doing work in the background has a much harder time than the ones that are making headlines. So using all sorts of PR tactics, being, the press, which we are very lucky to have an incredibly engaged community of journalists here in the region, or being, the wider tactics that, goes into a bit of advertising and marketing tactics at large. We see that this combined will help with priority, will help open the doors with regulators, will help open the doors with investors. And when an investor hears about you 3 or 4 times from different sources, then the trust is already by default, and it just takes a lot less time to build that trust than it will take by working in the background. And essentially, I would say that now PR agencies in general, PR professionals in general, are no longer just means of getting a press release out. They have become traders in influence, and with the right strategies and with the right openness from the founders and the startups in general, working with their brand DNA, working with what makes them very specific, you can really achieve incredible results in a much shorter time than you will do otherwise. Now, to go back to what's very important for our region, again zooming in into this, we have the FIT vision, which has been launched by the Central Bank of the UAE a couple of years back, and then we have the Vision 2030 from Saudi Arabia, which what I'm hearing is going to become a much larger timeline after the success that they had last week with Money 2020. Aligning ourselves as startups with these two incredible policy plans coming from the regulators again aligns with what the country is heading towards, right? Majority of our founders here in the region are not necessarily from the region. They might have arrived from different parts of the world. And once you take a product that you want to build and your narrative as a brand, and you shape that up together with or under the influence of what that country is going towards in terms of policy, then your formula of brand narrative becomes absolutely bulletproof, because the regulator will respect the fact that you are contributing to what they're building as well. And I think right now Saudi Arabia has a massive, massive, massive opportunity in that area, because they are basically in the beginning phases of what's going to be a true financial technology revolution in the years to come.
Fantastic insights. Thank you. Let's pick up from where you spoke about building trust as one of the first steps to building eventually the brand. What are the lessons from Silicon Valley to the Middle East that, what are the big PR lessons, whether it's Robinhood or whether it's Brex? What can founders in this part of the world learn from these playbooks, and how should they adapt them to this market? Please do share with us.
Absolutely. Thank you. I mean, we are working right now with founders from Silicon Valley, and it's a very, very, it's a huge learning curve. Even to this day, you see a lot of new things coming up, and probably next year I'll have new insights when it comes to what's going on right now around the AI space. But what I would like to highlight today are a few case studies that are the OGs, as we call them, the originals. These are players that had incredible success. They originated in Silicon Valley, and some of them started in quite difficult conditions. For example, WePay started around the time that was, right after the financial crisis. That's a very, very tough time to start a payments startup when people are not even thinking about revolutionizing payments in general. They were much more thinking about how are we saving up the economy and we are, going to some sort of normalcy. But all of these startups, Robinhood, WePay, Coinbase, actually, Affirm, they've pioneered some very interesting approaches. But at the same time, it might sound a bit simplistic, but the highlight of what I want to say today is sometimes the answer is the obvious one, is the simple tactic that we might put aside because we believe is too common or is too rudimental, that will actually achieve the most results. And again, we are definitely, and that's a disclaimer, we are in a market where we have different regulation and we have different rules, and from the manner that we speak, the manner that we write, to the manner that what we can build around us. But I feel like a few of these can be probably used by us in the future as well. So, for example, I'll speak about the guerrilla PR, which I would love to see more of this in the UAE in the coming years, hopefully. And they are the most special ones because when they started, they were right after the financial crisis. And then they've been a success story because they got acquired by JP Morgan Chase for like around $400 million years later. And when they started, they were an early stage startup. They were competing with PayPal, and PayPal was a giant at that point in time. It was very, very difficult to compete with them. They had, the PayPal mafia as founders, co-founders, and advisors, which then they became the kings of Silicon Valley, I would say. And they needed attention in a space that was dominated by players with huge amounts of budget to spend, which I think resonates quite a lot with us here in the Middle East as well. The PR budget is never going to be the most generous one in a budget spreadsheet, and having to work with what you got, it is the number one struggle that PRs, in-house, out-house, whatever, we have to deal with. So what they did, they went ahead right in PayPal's house at the conference that PayPal was hosting for their developers. They brought a giant frozen block. They froze some cash inside, and they made a problem that PayPal had, which was freezing accounts randomly for some sort of AML probably issue, but back then it was very rudimental. Again, it was not as developed as it is today. So what essentially they did, they went into their house, they made a play at the weakness that PayPal had, and they created an absolute moment for themselves, because everybody spoke about their brand. Everybody spoke about how funny that was, and immediately they positioned themselves as an alternative to PayPal, which is quite a difficult thing to do when you have to deal with such a legacy, I would say brand. So now I'm gonna just like have a look at my notes here, because they had, in terms of results, they had 3 times conversions and 300,000% traffic jump, with a 225% increase in signups on the spot within that specific period of time. And of course, that followed with follow-up press. TechCrunch loved the topic. The press loved the topic, and they went on to have a very successful history after that. Now, this is the type of, David versus Goliath battle story. And really, when you're dealing with massive competitors in the market, legacy competitors in the market, and we're talking here in the Middle East, even a smaller market, we are so small compared to North America, you have to become quite creative in analyzing young competitors, finding out what could be a way of making a play, safe one, at something that will immediately position you as on the same, above, or close to that level of quality. Definitely the Middle East doesn't allow us to make too many fun pokes at other brands because of our many laws protecting our image. But if we put our brains together and we create some interesting possibilities out of this, I'm pretty sure that it's always going to be a way of taking one thing that's missing from your competitor, a problem that your competitor has missed solving because they're already too big probably, and they're busy solving their own startup problems, as opposed to one problem that you're solving yourself. And again, it goes back to your brand DNA, really standing out with your power, with what makes you special, and that's what's going to bring the attention, the headlines, and sometimes even the regulator, the good regulator attention, not the bad one, not the one that's going to bring you fines. Now, another hack, if I may, 𝗪𝗏, I will continue with this one as well. I feel like Robinhood is such an interesting, it's such an interesting case study, and they're actually setting up in the Middle East. They will have a base out of ADGM, as far as I know, which is great. I love to see them in the market. When they started, Robinhood always had the strategy of community first, and I feel like they are a great case study in building community as a financial brand, as a fintech, finance, whatever you want to call yourself in that space. Building community for them, it was incredibly important. And how do you build communities? By creating fear of missing out, and by creating all sorts of wait lists and ways to engage your users way before you're actually launching. And they've done that incredibly well. In the very beginning, they were pre-product. They were basically pre-everything, and they needed a very radical stance when it comes to their position in the market, because they were fighting with legacy Wall Street trading, which that's a big deal. Back in the day, that was not very easy to go and take on the traditional Wall Street guys and say, hey, I have an alternative that will actually democratize access to trading and will make everybody in charge of their investments and get a taste of what it is to trade into the market. So the way they did this, they basically employed very early on the viral referral technique. They made sure that every single user that will be on their platform can bring another 100 user on or 10 user no, and that's like an ING OG sales technique. Every person that you meet knows at least 10 other people that you could meet too. And they've really taken that into the online space, and they've created a very, very interesting proposition pre-launch. Now, in terms of signups, they got 10K signups in day one when they started that campaign, 50 within a week, and 1 million users before launch. Imagine launching your product with 1 million users. That's insane. Now, if we zoom out and we go back to the UAE, I feel like UAE is very much positioned within communities. We have so many communities in such a small country. Why? Because we have a very large representation of every country, almost every country on the planet, which makes it incredibly easy for you to go in and build a community and build a very targeted community that will actually convert into becoming your customer. That very much happening within the B2C space. And if we're moving towards the B2B space, that's where we are seeing even more need for the community point of view, because the B2B space really operates in silos, operates in singularity most of the times. And once you start solving problems for a large amount of B2Bs, that's where the opportunity is in building a community, which automatically will make you stand up. You're engaging community, you speak to them, you solve their problems, you listen to them, and you listen to their objections, which it's a great way of converting that into your content narrative. Communities automatically refers to face-to-face PR, which is very much Middle East DNA. We have a great way of combining face-to-face interaction with technology over here, and I think it's going to be this way for a very long time to come. Do you have any questions so far, or can I continue? Okay, I will continue. The hack number 3 and 4 are very, very well, the 3 of them that's coming after this. They're quite common actually for us as well. We're talking about owning your geography. We're talking about hijacking events and hijacking partnerships. In terms of owning geography, I would say that this one is the most expensive one out of all the hacks that you can employ, because it does require hijacking the street basically and really going where your audience is. 𝗏𝗏𝗋𝗋, which was is a simplified expense management company out of San Francisco. They did that back in the day, and in order for them to really stand out, they had to go where their target audience was and really tapestry around the city with billboards that were speaking the language of their target audience. And again, I will go back to what I said earlier, really understanding your target audience and your community, then taking that messaging and making it your headline. It is incredibly important because your audience will always feel seen and understood. Definitely, this is the most expensive part. Why? Because the advertising space in the UAE specifically is incredibly expensive, as we all know. And the more people you want to hit, the more expensive it's going to get. If you want to speak with wealth managers, you go to the IFC. That's not a cheap way to advertise. If you want to speak with a large amount of customers that can get on your solutions, then you have to go to places that are the most transited. And we're talking about by metro and other places within the city or the airport. I would say that Dubai is a walking billboard. So everywhere is an opportunity to own that. And for sure, you will find ways of adapting the budget. I would say what's important about Brexit, what they did have a very small budget for that kind of campaign, right? Because they only had like $300,000, which in the US, San Francisco specifically, is quite nothing. And they did use that small budget by choosing the area where their target audience was the most concentrated. So basically, don't try to spread it thin across the city. Just get one place where you know that 80% at least, or 50% or 60% of your target audience is going to see it, and just spend money in a much more targeted way. And to make it even better, you have to have messaging that will actually make a reporter passing by see that. It's like, okay, that's very fun and I'd like to write about it. It's really creating this everywhere illusion while you're delivering messages that resonate with people. And you're taking basically a whole new meaning for the market, marketing the street, and really taking the PR to the voice of street. And then the other 2, the event piggybacking and partnerships. I feel like I can somehow combine these 2 because they're very, very important. Coinbase did that at the Super Bowl. They did it in 2022. Everybody hated crypto in 2022, as we all remember. It was not a good year for crypto. The PR around crypto was really bad. But they did have to do something, because otherwise they would have ceased to exist, right? As a brand, or the trust, to regain that trust that has been lost, not by their fault, but by the industry events, it is one of the most difficult things to do. So they hijacked the biggest event that there is in their geography, which is the Super Bowl, with a simple QR code that was bouncing around the screen for 60 seconds, leading them to a Bitcoin giveaway. That was incredibly simple, yet incredibly effective. Sometimes it just shows that your audience, it's very simple to speak to. You don't have necessarily to have something super flashy. You chose the flashiest spot, then simplify the message and give them something that they want. It just jumped. The data spoke for itself. Just to check my notes over here, they had a 60 seconds ad, and that ad led to 20 million visits in 1 minute to their website, which crashed their website, which was incredible. And they had a growth of 309% on app installs within the following week. Plus, of course, the PR that came out of it, the headlines that came out of it, and the trust that has been created within that. Simplicity and a little bit of mystery sometimes really will lead you to places where your audience will want to engage with you. Now, in the Middle East, we have plenty of great events. We don't have a Super Bowl, but what we have plenty of other events, right? We had Money 2020 last week. We have JTEX coming up in 3 weeks now, or less than that. We have LIB happening in next year in Saudi again. We have Abu Dhabi Finance Week happening in December. A multitude of other events around it, but these, I think, they are the most important ones, the ones that have the highest footprint. It is important to hijack these events, and for us, it's a lot flashier than it is within the Silicon Valley, but all the journalists are over there. They're covering not only from the UAE, but from all over the world. All the investors are there. Everybody that could become a partner for you, or become an investor, or become anything, a broadcaster of your message, is there. And really hijacking that moment by doing something that really stands you out within the community that you want to reach is the best way to do it. I would say is the time of the year where you want to engage with regulators and with institutional investors. Abu Dhabi Finance Week is the place to do it. You want to speak with large volumes of investors, JTEX is the place to do it. You want to signal entry in Saudi Arabia, Money 2020 was the place to do it last week. And I feel like these are where you have attention in one spot. Attention is a very, very hot commodity, very hard to get, very hard to maintain. And once you get it, if there is one PR campaign you want to do a year, that's all you can do in 1 year. Just choose one of these things and really target yourself within those moments. Now, with the partnerships, we've seen that happening with Affirm back in Silicon Valley. Affirm is one of the buy now, pay later players. We have some of those here in the region as well. And they were very much in direct competition with Klarna. Klarna was a lot bigger. Very difficult to maintain and acquire customer within this buy now, pay later segment. I feel, and I believe 𝗵𝗵𝗍 can also confirm the customer acquisition cost when it comes to the likes of buy now, pay later strategies is quite expensive. And at the same time, it doesn't really convert as easily as it would convert in other segments. So what they did, they leveraged Amazon Prime Day. They partnered up with Amazon, and they created a huge amount of footprint across all the customers that they could have, which led to 450 million impressions across their brand, but a lot more conversion as well. And probably here in the Middle East, partnerships are the bedrock of the fintech community. Every fintech in the country has a level of a partnership with somebody else, be it Visa, be it MasterCard, be it a bigger brand, a smaller brand, a bank, a licensed financial institution. Everybody within the fintech community must have a partnership of sorts. It is not an industry where you're by yourself. It's an industry where you have to partner up with those. I feel like that's the easiest win ever. It's also the easiest way to create visibility, because usually the partners that you're coming in contact with already have a large amount of brand equity. They already own that share in the market, and attaching yourself to their wagon, basically building those very visible partnerships, be it, you just sign up a memorandum of understanding to do something, or you're launching a product together, or they're becoming your advisors. Whatever the deal is, that could automatically increase your footprint in the market, increases also your digital footprint, but also increases the trust. Because one of the biggest issues we have in the PR is how do we quantify trust? Trust cannot be quantified in a number or percentage. But what is quantified is in the way that the market sentiment reflects back at your brand and the way that you see third parties really being involved with your brand and having that beautiful list of all the third parties that really stand for your brand. And of course, we have great financial centers here like ADGM and the Abu Dhabi Global Markets and Dubai Financial, DIFC, Dubai International Financial Center. I would say between the two, I've seen in my experience, in my practice, great engagement from ADGM. They are incredibly supportive in building this third-party partnership view. And whenever there is from entering the market all the way full cycle to licensing, we see that support in broadcasting the message, attaching their brand to your brand, because they know that will give you a lot of visibility to potential institutional investors and partners and adoption or potential clients if you're into B2B space. And it's an incredible, massive growth. It really helps the trust factor, and it's a no-cost tactic as well, which really makes it very, very efficient from this. So to kind of like wrap it up, it is quite obvious that simplicity is the way to go. And sometimes the answers are right in front of us. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. But where the lessons actually are in the way that it has been executed, in the moments that have defined those campaigns as being successful, and really choosing wisely, looking at what you have available, budgets, manpower, storylines, partners, events, geography, all of this, looking at what you have available and picking and choosing what could be the most PR-worthy public thing that you can do, and really building the relationships with journalists as well.
Thank you. Some fantastic takeaways from those case studies. Very, very interesting and fun. Apart from obviously large budgets, if you had to distill it down, what should every fintech founder include in their PR toolkit to move markets and obviously win influence in this region?
Fantastic question. Fantastic question. They have to include themselves. They are the number one PR tactic that they can have. The difference, and it's quite a large difference that I've seen, and I mentioned that in the beginning of the session, that I've seen between Silicon Valley and other emerging regions, was the fact that founders oftentimes will sit in the background and will build in silence and not go public before their solution is actually launched. The bad news is if you go public when your solution is launching, it's too late. You have already missed a large amount, because it takes a lot of time to build something. This is not going to happen overnight. It's never happening overnight. And we all know that. We've all seen, work in fintechs, and we know that it takes a lot of time. If you're waiting from day one, from the inception of it, all the way up to launch, to go public with your story, you will miss a large amount of opportunity to build community, to build a personal brand, to build regulatory trust, all of that. I have clients that I work with for many years, when specifically coming from abroad into the UAE post 2020. And they arrived here probably 2021, 2022, which was usually the time when majority of the foreign businesses started moving towards ADGM, the IFC. And a lot of them probably just launched their solutions recently, maybe last year, end of the year before. So from the moment they arrived all the way up to the launch, they used that time to build trust in the market, because it's such a heavily focused market on relationships, on trust, on perception. And that perception cannot be built behind closed doors. You have to start building your visibility. And as a founder, what's incredibly important is to start investing into your visibility. We all know that it's incredibly scary because you're focused on, okay, I want to build my solution, my technology, all the things that I have to do as a founder. It's an incredibly difficult task. However, if you're putting yourself in the shadow, your brand is going to take a hit. You are the brand. You are the PR of the brand, basically, and you are the trust factor. You are the investor, basically target. You are the regulator connection as well. So everybody, we like it or we don't like it, invests more in you than they will invest in your brand. And that's why we see a lot of founders that probably they sold their businesses or they had successful exits or less successful exits. When they go on and they start something new, they automatically started on a high because they have already built a personal brand. I feel from the Silicon Valley, the one bad example that comes to mind is the founder of WeWork, right? WeWork was tanked altogether. He goes on a couple of years later and raises, I don't know, $200 million to start something else. And he raised so easily. Why would you give money to a guy that tanked multiple billions business? Why would you do that? It's because his personal brand was incredibly powerful. And sometimes when your personal brand is so powerful, it just literally doesn't anything else. It becomes a secondary tactic. So what I would say to fintechs in general, and founders of fintechs and the marketeers that work with the founders, probably to nudge the founders to actually take aligned action when it comes to their personal brand. And in the Middle East, it's quite easy to do so because we're a small country, but very rich in opportunity. Everybody's friendly. Everybody wants to meet you. Journalists are interested in stories. Journalists are not interested in brand stories or in logos. They're interested in stories that will lead to expertise. From what we've seen in practice, and I feel like we have a few of the PR professionals here right now that could confirm that what works right now in the market more than press releases is opinion editorials and commentary hijack. That works the most, which means you as a founder, without even having your solution launch, you can go on, write an opinion editorial that is, aligned to a headline that's happening in the market at that specific time. Like, for example, then we have a lot coming from, the Trump administration. That's a great way to hijack those lines. Or we have a lot coming from, the policies that are being, created here in the region. Great opportunities to hijack those headlines and write opinion editorials from your perspective. That automatically aligns you with a developing trend. That automatically aligns you with authority. Or you can place a comment. You don't necessarily need to have a whole dissertation on a bigger topic, but you can place your comment, your view on what's important. The more views you have, the more comments you have, the more opinions you have, the more authority you gain. And the more authority you gain, you have opportunities to get in the inbox of people that otherwise will be very difficult to meet. And I think I was talking with 𝗪𝗏 about this a couple of weeks ago when YouGov report came out and showed that newspapers in the UAE are a thing. Everywhere else in the world, they're dying, not in the UAE. They're alive and well, and everybody reads them. Everybody reads newspapers, listens to podcasts, and watches TV. We are totally a unicorn for the media community, I would say, because we're still doing those things that are dying in other parts of the world. And what a great opportunity to get in front of a regulator. You arriving on the newspaper that sits right on his office in the morning when he gets to the office, and he reads about you and he reads your views. And then when you get to him with your application for regulation, he knows who you are already. You don't have to work extra hard to get that due diligence in place. Sometimes the due diligence is also very soft in terms of personal branding, and that's incredibly important. So really anchoring into what's going on in those specific geographies, right, depending where you are in the region, really attaching yourself to media cycles that are valuable to your business, and hijacking them will work in your favor. Then making use of all the social media platforms that we have, right? Like LinkedIn is the highest performing in the region compared to other regions as well. Why not use it? Show your expertise over there. Sometimes we will not necessarily get approved by journalists with our op-eds, right? That's also depending on a third party and on their approval. But this doesn't mean that you can be stopped from voicing your opinion. You have LinkedIn, you have a blog on your website, you have multiple other mediums to get out there and speak about what you're passionate, automatically that converts into eyes on your brand, eyes on you, eyes on the business that you're building, on the solution that you're building. Now, things that are also incredibly important is, in going back to what we were mentioning earlier, the institutional partnerships that you're involved with. All those photo ops when you're signing an MOU with, let's say, a large regulator, you're signing that MOU, you're shaking hands with that person. It's you in the photo, is not your brand. It's you. You're the personal brand. You're the business in that moment. You're the ambassador for it. Taking account of all these little details and making them a thing and making them public and even brag about them, this again adds to all those other little things. And localizing your content in bilingual opportunities, both English and Arabic, will always work. I feel like sometimes probably the fact that brands don't use anymore and founders don't use anymore a bilingual opportunity really takes away from spreading the message in some other communities as well. Back in the day, we were having a lot of data around how fast former Twitter, now X, was growing in the Arabic content space as opposed to the English speaking space. It was incredible to see that if you tweet something in Arabic, you would have thousands of impressions much faster than you would have it in English. And I feel like it's still valuable to introduce that, of course, depending on your target audience and the type of solution that you're building. But it's one way to also show respect to the place that you're at and really get that message in a much bigger reach. And probably one last thing that is incredibly important is build in public. Build in public. I hear this in Silicon Valley. I hear around here, around some of our founders here as well. I want this to become a bit more of a mainstream. Build in public. Building in public means building trust. Back in 2020, during peak pandemic, I'll make a bit of a political example if you want. The former PM of New Zealand, Jacinda, she was probably the most recognizable figure of COVID and COVID, enforcement. Why? Because she ditched every single rule book about how a prime minister should communicate, and she took on the social media, and she sat in front of a mobile phone camera and gave an update, publicly broadcasted on social media every single time something important happened. So she removed the barrier between her position and the office that she was representing and the population of her country, knowing very well that she needs to have a much more approachable way of communicating with people that were increasingly anxious, and we all know what a difficult time that was for New Zealand specifically. So really taking the same model, but in a much positive way, obviously, and building in public and removing that barrier between you and your target audience, between you and your regulators, between you and your investors, and starting being more public with your updates will lead you to an increased visibility and more trust. Be it, these are our adoption numbers. These are some of the challenges that we went through. This is where we are at right now. This is, the amount of impact we've made. This is how much we saved for our customers. All of these little milestones that I know that are very important within the community, within the startup, need to be broadcasted and made a thing for the public as well. Building in public is incredibly important. That's how you move the needle. That's how you move the market. That's how you build your own DNA-like structure for the communication.
Fantastic. Thank you. So I hear you say, think like Silicon and execute with Middle Eastern nuance, right? But what does that actually look like in practice for a startup founder?
That's incredible because obviously Silicon Valley is located in a massive country with massive appetite for risk. I think that's what's very much a definition of the US. They love risk, they invest in risk, they don't care about losing the money, they just want to build, right? not so much in the Middle East. I feel like Middle East is a bit more cautious when it comes to risk. But at the same time, we are incredibly segmented. We are smaller, and we have different regulations, different ways of doing things. When I say think like Silicon Valley is about thinking big and outside the box. If you look at a large number of communication pieces coming into the press, majority of them kind of look alike. And that's because companies, they don't want to take risk in approaching their communication differently. And I've seen this even in my practice, because even if we want to do things in a different way, the decision ultimately is going to be with the founder or the board or with the heads. Is not going to be our decision. So taking a bit more risk and really thinking bigger in terms of how your message can be tweaked around, and then adapting that to the Middle East reality, right? To the fact that here you have to combine your online presence with your offline presence, that partnerships and relationships are incredibly important and you have to build them. The fact that you have to employ a bit of more bilingual approach, the fact that you have to monitor the language of the leadership of the country that you're in and adapt yourself to that language, so you can actually speak the same language as your regulators, speak the same language as your investors, but at the same time approaching your messaging with boldness. Because if you're looking at, raising levels of money that you only see in North America, you will have to bring to the table something different. And really looking at all these big success case studies and looking at their founders and how they approach their communication and how they are becoming so valuable assets for Bloomberg, for example, or they become valuable assets for FT, or they become valuable speakers for Davos, and they become valuable shapers of influence across the board. It's possible for us too. We are influencing a very small part of the world, but I feel like right now with changes around the globe in terms of where the technology geniuses are going towards, and our position as in terms of safety and openness, we have probably the most friendly and open regulators in the world that will consult the community for every single thing that they want to create. It's incredible. You don't see that anywhere else. Really taking all these smaller Middle East nuances, but daring to think very big in terms, very bold, very different, very very DNA, right? That will be what will lead to more local brands to start actually influencing and shaping up larger global narratives as well. And again, I'm speaking from the perspective of PR here and shaping up, because we are contributing to media cycles. We're not necessarily creating our own. And I feel like we could start creating our own. We just need to dare a little bit more.
Thanks, Loredana. Finally, just to wrap this up, if a fintech founder is listening today and wants to hack headlines tomorrow, what's the one piece of advice that you would leave them with?
Fantastic. Yes. Read everything. Read the news. Really read the news and see which ones are more aligned to an expertise that you can contribute with. So for example, I'll give an example that I've experimented myself as a founder of a PR agency, just to see what is possible. We've had a couple of interesting news cycles forming this year around President Trump, and we really hijacked those cycles, like learnings on how to not communicate, or learnings on how fast you can lose trust, and the likes, and you guys know what I'm talking about. It was incredible to see the appetite of otherwise legacy media outlets that will require you to pay for placement, how open they were to getting those placements and actually displaying them on their online space. And that's because the topic was highly relevant and it was already creating incredibly a large amount of viewership. And that's a one headline that you want to hijack and you want to be attached to. This is the easiest way to get press, I would say. Also, easiest way to get broadcast TV, really hijacking, and then, but again, it has to be, your expertise has to be aligned with what's going on, or at least we can look at your expertise and say, okay, how can we make you hijack worthy, if I could call it like that, and to get you into primetime TV and speak about this topic from your perspective and from your analysis perspective. So read the news, all the news that are relevant to your industry, read them. A subscription to Bloomberg would be great. That's what you need. That will help you a lot.